Welcome to this webinar on dialogue and culture. So, how to create a culture that supports dialogue. And of course, by dialogue, as always, we're talking about not just talking together, but this form of communication where we are thinking together, where we are putting things in and new ideas emerge, which would be unlikely to emerge in any individual person. So that's really how can we? What are the practical steps that we can take to start shaping the culture of an organization into a place where that becomes the natural way of talking together. So that's the theme. And as always, when Sarah and I do these kind of webinars, we are going to be very close to practice. So I'm going to give you three very practical tools that you can play with as soon as this call is over. But before we start, I just want you to write something on a piece of paper. So we just did a check-in where we heard something from everybody, and I asked you to say, what is it that you find appealing or attractive or intriguing about the concept of a culture of dialogue? And then we went round, everybody said a little something, and just take 30 seconds to notice how you feel now, or how the energy is for you now. Um, and just write down a word or two. Doesn't have to be much, but just sort of like, is the energy that you're sitting with, is it different now from when you logged on the call? So before and after, we're doing a before and after check-in. Let's see here. Present and connected. Before, had the emails on my mind. Yes, that is very interesting, right? So it brings you into the room and help you land, help you focus on the dialogue or the conversation that we are going to have. Of course, I'm going to be talking for a while, but we will also have time for dialogue later. Oh, now people are writing in the chat. Sure, we do it. Energy has come down, engaged, keen, interested, fantastic. Yes, so tuned in, right? Um, more like I've arrived, more curious than when I joined. That's fantastic. Good. Excellent. Yes. And these are some very common effects. And as you can see, again here, more curious, interested in learning about what this all mean, energized and intrigued. Yes. And I think this is fascinating, right? So we're doing a check-in, and the energy that you are describing, you can see this is very fruitful ground for dialogue. When you have that, you're intrigued, you're energized, you're curious. That is really an energy that is very conducive for dialogue. So, I mean, since you're here, of course, I don't have to say much I don't have to convince you that dialogue is interesting, but just I'm going to say a little bit anyway. So, uh, dialogue, let's say conversations, that's the tool that we use for almost everything in an organization. Decision making, conflict resolution, innovation, developing strategy development, almost everything that we do, sales, marketing, it involves conversations. So if we can enhance the quality of those conversations, we are going to enhance everything across the board. And dialogue is the name that we use for a particularly potent form of conversation. And some of the issues that, if you have a culture where the norm is to engage in this kind of potent conversation that we call dialogue, there's a whole host of issues that will maybe not completely disappear, but become more rare. Like, for example, when the moment you have more than, let's say, 20 people in an organization, people start thinking it's a good idea to have departments and rooms. When you have the very small startups, everybody's doing everything and everybody's talking to everybody all the time because we only have one room to sit in. The moment you put up walls, have you noticed how all the problems seem to be generated by the people on the other side of the wall? There's something very interesting in that physical space that creates the division and makes it so easy to feel that people on the other side of the wall, they're the ones who don't understand, they're the ones who are messing up things. And dialogue really helps uh, retaining that communication and connection, even if you are in a bigger organization with walls or departments or separate buildings or separate countries, right? The more separation, the easier it is to think that the other people are creating the problems. I also think so. This is not, I'm not giving an exhaustive list, but just giving some examples to show the scope. I think another place that I see it see lack of dialogue being very detrimental is unsuccessful hires. Many times I worked with managers who tell me about problems where they hire somebody and then before the hire there wasn't a real dialogue around why are we hiring this person, what exactly are the responsibilities going to be, what kind of profile are we looking for, what competences should they have, how much are they going to be developed after the hire, how much should they come with, all these kind of things. Or even after the hire, people can be very confused in their jobs, saying, well, I've been here for half a year, I still don't really know what I'm supposed to do. Can anybody relate to this? Yeah, okay, I'm seeing some nodding, right. So this is another one, and this is very different from the turf war. This is just a coordination issue, you can say. Um, and a third example I like to put out is KPIs. We all know it's a good idea to measure the kind of things that are important, but I see some of you are smiling. You know where this is heading, right? Uh, you know the problem that sometimes people optimize not for um, organizational success, but for looking good on whatever we're measuring. And those two do not always go together. And again, here we have to have really good dialogue to understand, are we measuring the right things? Do people have different ideas about what the numbers mean? Um, do anybody know what the numbers mean? And so on. So yeah, so dialogue is really important in that way. And in many organizations, we have all organizations, we have conversations. Sometimes we have what can be called serial monologues. I deliver my thing, you deliver your thing, but we don't really interact with each other. Sometimes we have debates where uh, you are really engaging in the dialogue in order to make the other person see the light, because they clearly haven't. And you're just gonna wait your turn. And if you listen to the other, and that's an if you listen to the other, you're gonna listen for something that they can say that you can use against them, or that you can use to make your point or bolster your point. And then, of course, dialogue, how we define it, is a center or a conversation with a center, not sides. And that is to deliberately say we move beyond the place where we are trying to convince each other of something. We get curious, we get intrigued, we get into that kind of space where we are uh, willing to ask other people their opinion, even if you think that their opinion is dissimilar from yours, or maybe their opinion is about you and it's not particularly favorable. And we kind of are curious and intrigued to hear it, right? That kind of energy. Because this is where the dialogue can become really potent. And so the first of the three tools, how do that's the question is then how do we make this kind of dialogue the norm in an organization? How do we make that? That's just it would be strange if we didn't talk together like that. How do we get there? The first tool I'd like to share is what we did at the beginning of this webinar, check-ins. Routinizing check-ins. So meetings are just started with check-ins as a norm. That's a very simple thing to do, and it can profoundly change the culture over time. Many times when Sarah and I are out working in organizations, one of the feedback that we get a lot is um, check-ins are so cool. I see some nodding. Yes, I know. So check-ins are so cool. It's simple. It can feel a little weird, maybe artificial in the beginning, but it gets normal over time. And once it's gotten normal, it is a superpower because it so quickly focuses uh, a group into a space that is conducive to dialogue. So when you do check-ins, I did a very simple check-in. I just asked one question. What intrigues you about the theme of this meeting? But you can use questions. You can also use sentence stems. If you use questions, you can say something like, what is the energy that you're stepping in with? That's a question that Sarah and I use a lot. We deliberately don't say, how are you feeling today? Because if you say that in an organizational setting, I don't know if you can imagine. Some places it will be fine, but some places people are going to go, oh, is this like an encounter group? What are we doing here? This sounds like psychotherapy, right? But if you say, what is the energy you're stepping in with? It's essentially the same question. It's just formulated in a language that makes it easier for people generally in the corporate world to engage with it. Another question that is great to have in a check-in is what would be a good outcome for you? Because then you get a sense of why are people here? What do they hope to get? And it can already the conversation already starts when you hear that. If you understand what everybody thinks would be a good outcome, sometimes you can be surprised. Uh, you thought this whole meeting, a good outcome would be to agree on something, and somebody else said, well, a good outcome would be if I know what the options are. So that's good to know. Another question that we often use would be something like, what would make this worth your time? So this meeting is 1 hour long. What would have happened in this meeting so that you would feel happy about having invested 1 hour of your day in this meeting? Again, it's a bit more open than the outcomes, but it still gets that sense of what are the things that we for sure should be talking about and aiming for in order for people to feel good about this. So if you want to be more questions can be a little tricky sometimes because when you ask questions, they can be interpreted in many different ways. So you get a broader variety of answers. If you want the check-in to provide or focus very specifically on a specific kind of information, sentence stems are really great. So you basically ask people to complete a particular sentence. For those of you who were joined the webinar on purpose, we talked about doing a check-in when if we're in a group and we're working with an organizational purpose, then we can ask people to complete the sentence. A thing that makes me proud to work here is. Can you see how that is much more specific? It will give you much more focused answers. And if you construct the sentence stem in a good way, it'll give you the kind of information that can be really, really useful going into the meeting and setting the stage for what are we talking about in this meeting. if you are interested in, if you don't want to ask the question, what would a good outcome of this meeting be, you can also ask people to complete the sentence stems. A good outcome for this meeting would be. When they start with that sentence, they don't go off on all sorts of tangents. So that can be useful. Let's see. Also primes the emotional state, tunes into the issue to come. Yes, exactly. So that can also be a good use of it. So check-ins are really, really great. When you construct your check-in, and I really encourage you to spend time on putting together a meeting agenda, spend time on formulating or crafting the questions or sentence stems that you use for the check-in, because it's time well spent. And sometimes it's a good idea to think what is, like, to the point on setting the emotional tone, right? You can also say, what is this the first? Are these all new people? If it's all new people, you'll ask different questions than if it's people who are very familiar with each other. Or if you're doing, facilitating a workshop, like Sarah and I we will sometimes say, is this a day 1 or a day 2 check-in question, right? Sometimes you have to have gone through day 1, built done some container building, made people feel comfortable and psychologically safe. Now we can go for this other question. So, for example, one of the questions that Sarah often uses as an example of a day 2 question would be, in this meeting, I give myself permission to. You can hear, if you have a whole new batch of people and there's done no container building in advance, that kind of question might come in a little hard. But if you've done a whole day and people have become much more familiar with each other, and then you ask this on the second day, it can it might be a little on the edge, but it might take the whole energy into something more personal and deeper, and that's what you want to do. So it's a good idea to spend time crafting your check-in questions and sentence stems. Having check-ins as something that you just do in every meeting, basically, does a lot of different things. One thing is, it brings in all the voices into the room, and therefore it sets the pattern of full participation. And this is really important. If within the first 5 minutes you've said something, you're more likely to say something more during the rest of the meeting than if you haven't. So that's really good. It encourages people to land, especially nowadays when we're doing a lot of online meetings. There's like literally 0 second of transition time. In other time, with physical meetings, at least you have to walk down the hall and look for the room, right? And then you have a little bit of time with yourself to reset your thoughts and think, what was this meeting about? With the online, you just click and you came straight from another meeting. You have 0 idea what's going on. You haven't collected your thoughts. So this gives you that space for transitioning. It also creates, it's a good way of creating psychological safety. If you, in the check-in, include questions that it encourages people to share something a little more personal, and it doesn't have to be much more personal than, for example, what we did today. What intrigues you about this topic? Well, that's a personal thing. What intrigues you? And when you hear other people share something more personal, you feel you're talking to other human beings. You feel you're surrounded by human beings. And it's very relaxing to feel that human to human connection. It really can create that sense of psychological safety. It is also a great way of changing the discourse. I think sometimes when conversation in meetings is not dialogical, it's because they stay on a super abstract level. People will say truisms and abstractions that nobody can either comprehend or contradict because they don't really know what, it sounds right. But in order for dialogue to work, you have to get into the concrete level. You have to make some statements that can be contradicted. You have uh, uh, say something very concrete. And you can construct check-ins, like, for example, what would a good outcome be? And you can encourage people to be very concrete about that. So that is also something that you can use check-ins for. Good. So that was tool number one, check-ins. How I'm curious, just to a survey. How many people are already using check-ins as a regularly as a way of starting meetings? You're so advanced. So anybody say this is we actually don't do that very often? Yes. Good. Fantastic. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. People will think it's slightly odd, but it's so fruitful. The second tool, which is very concrete, and check outs. Yes, that's a good point. That's actually a good point. That's the other one, right? So you can return to the same questions. You can have different questions. So what was a good outcome from this meeting, or what do you take forward? Those are also very good. Another tool that is very good for cultivating a culture of dialogue is group agreements. So whenever Sarah and I do dialogue work or workshops, we have a bunch of group agreements, and these are the ground rules. These are the rules of engagement that governs how we talk together. And I'll share what's on our ground rules as inspiration, but it's really good to make your own. And there might be something that has to do with the place that you work that is very specific to the place that you work that you have to do. Using a bit of time on going through the ground rules when they are introduced is really good. But after that, it can just be like a standard slide that you have at the beginning of every presentation or when you're facilitating meetings. It can take 20 seconds to go through them, but doing it regularly, like just as a standard way of starting a meeting, just having that slide as a standard way of starting a meeting can help those group agreements seep into the cultural fabric. So some of the agreements that Sarah and I use is one of them is keep confidentiality. Sometimes you're talking about something and maybe there are things on your mind, but you won't say it because you're concerned it might leave the room and be quoted out of context and create problems for you down the line. So if you are in a meeting where confidentiality is useful, it's very good to state it directly. This is one of the group rules of engagement. We keep whatever comes up in this meeting confidential. Another one that is very useful is to be present and listen fully. Sometimes in the check-in, Sarah and I will say, what do you need to say to be fully present? And then the group agreement will be, while we are here, we're here. We're not answering, mails on the phone or something like that, or thinking what are we going to say to that other person, or planning the next meeting, or whatever you can do in the comfort of the privacy of your own mind. We are actually here. That's a very nice group agreement as well. Another group agreement that we often use is welcome uncomfortable moments. When we use that one, we generally explain it by saying we're not trying to make this meeting uncomfortable, but if there are uncomfortable moments, let's try to welcome them instead of fixing them or resolving them or just running away from them or shutting them down. Because when people get a little, ooh, this is uncomfortable, that's often when we've hit on something where we need to have a dialogue. So we struck gold basically when people start becoming a little bit uncomfortable, and that is a really good framing to have. So this is why we say welcome uncomfortable moments. Another group agreement that we often have is be on time, and that's because dialogue is a journey. So uh, if you when you start having a dialogue, you start thinking together, and that thinking process you move through that thinking process. If somebody comes 10 minutes 20 minutes late, they haven't been on the journey. They're not gonna you can sort of say, well, what we've been talking about so far is da 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 da, and they can get the summary, but they won't have been through the process that brought you there. And therefore it's just so important that we start the journey together, we end it together. Another group agreement that we often use is feel free to pass. So if we do rounds or something like that, and you don't have anything to say, or you don't feel comfortable saying what you have to say, it's fine to pass. This is really important because then people are not occupied with, ooh, how do I get out of this one, or how do I navigate this one? Because you can always say, I choose to pass on this one. Uh, and of course, it is very useful when you are having workshops where you're doing exercises, but also in meetings, because the next tool I'm going to get to is about choreographies. And sometimes there you're doing rounds or something like that, and it's nice to know you can always pass. Uh, and maybe the last one that I want to mention is the nobody gets to be wrong, or sometimes you say there are no stupid questions. And I think we've often, I mean, this is a familiar thing to say. We've often heard it, but there's a difference between hearing something and even agreeing with a rule and then feeling the rule, right? Feeling it in the marrow of your bones. That you want to get to a place where the concept of being wrong or stupid question feels odd to you. It's like, what does that even mean? It's strange to you. That's a good place to get to. A story that I like to tell that for me illustrates this very nicely is I used to work a lot with musicians, and I was involved with especially among singer-songwriters, there is this thing about co-writing. So singer-songwriters who write their own songs, they will often write songs with others. Why? Because then the song gets out to a broader audience. More people get to hear it if I play it in my concerts and the two other people I wrote it with also play it in their concerts. And that's good for everybody. One thing that they singer-songwriters do is, how do we share royalties for a song? And they say, we split it evenly among everybody in the room, no matter what. And this might sound strange, right? Because if you're in the room and at the end of it, you wrote all the words for the lyrics, it's your chord progressions, it's your, you feel I wrote 90% of what's in the finished song is my work. Why should I not get 90% of the royalties? And the reasoning that you will hear many musicians give is, well, you only got those ideas because you reacted to all the dumb ideas that the other people gave. So sometimes, if you ask a stupid question or you propose something that you thought was good and then everybody else tells you why it's bad, you're still making an invaluable contribution to the dialogue, because by by proposing something silly, you give the other people the opportunity to get much clearer about their thinking, and that clarity wouldn't have happened without you. So I really like that attitude to say everything. You can't really evaluate whether a question or a proposition was good or bad without looking at all the dialogue that came after it, everything it spawned. So even if the original idea doesn't survive the dialogue and is completely eradicated from the dialogue, it can still have been contributing to the generative force that created whatever was created in the dialogue. Does that make sense? Cool. So I like that story because for me it really gives that sense of it's not just that we don't judge contributions as wrong or stupid or questions as stupid. It's that judgment call is actually strange and very difficult to uphold in any meaningful way. When we work with the group agreements, we also often, the last bullet point will be anything else. So because maybe somebody in the group says, I would really like this agreement or this to be on the list of agreements. And sometimes people have good ideas, right? So that's always nice to include as well. So this was the second tool, the having group agreements. And I will say check-ins and group agreements as just standard ways of starting meetings can be so incredibly useful. So group agreements and check-ins get you off to a really good start. It can get people in a, it builds the container, and the container is for, on the one hand, it builds a sense of psychological safety. It's like I can speak here. I know the other people are human beings. I get a human to human connection. I feel more safe. And on the other hand, it also creates a sense of energy, curiosity, a sense of possibility. We might actually get something done in this meeting, unlike maybe some of the other meetings, right? So that and the container is really the combination of those two, a sense of safety and a sense of possibility and energy. So great, now you're off to a good start. It's like the energetic landscape is set. What do you do with the rest of the meeting, right? That's that's the big question. And Sarah and I, we like to talk about using different choreographies. So we facilitate meetings through different choreographies, and we have a whole host of choreographies, which are the purpose is to disrupt stuck dynamics. So we don't want to have the same meeting we had last week and last month and so on. We want to shake things up a bit to see if something new can emerge. And I'm just gonna briefly mention some of the choreographies. Some of them will no doubt be familiar to some of you, but it's nice to have a pot to put them in. These are choreographies that disrupt stuck patterns. So one of them is the continuum line. And this is basically just having people get up out of their chairs and put themselves on a line in the room. And you can put two things at each end of the line, and then people just place themselves on that line where they feel that expresses their viewpoint. So you can think of the line as a Likert scale, a human Likert scale, and then people place themselves where they want. For example, if you're working with a team, you might and working about how to increase team performance. Maybe you'll give a brief description of this is what a high performing team functions like, and this is what a low performing team functions like. And then you can say, here's the position for the high functioning team. Here's the position for the low functioning team. Now we have a scale. Go and place yourself on the point in the scale that fits your perception of how your team operates. And then you can physically see, and you might be surprised where some people, oh, are you standing there? Do you think we operate like a high performance? Do you think it's a low performance? You might be curious about why people have placed themselves where they placed themselves. And then you can sort of interview the scale. So you can interview the people that are standing at the one end of the scale and the other end of the scale and the middle of the scale. And that is a great way of, again, have full participation and a choreography that really supports actual dialogue. Another Another choreography is the clock face. Also, for this one, you get out of your chair, and this is where you will place people on. If you imagine you have a circle in the room, and it's like a clock, so you go from 12 o'clock and through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the way to 12. And at the 5 minutes past 12, that there you place yourself. That's the youngest employee, the employee who have been there the shortest amount of time in the organization. And then you just organize according to length of service until you have the one that has been there the longest. This can be a very powerful way of showing a lot of different things. One thing that it can show is that the most senior people are not always the ones who have been there the longest. And the people who have been there the longest, noticing them in that capacity is also a way of acknowledging that they are what you could say the organizational memory. They will have so much experience and knowledge about what's been tried in the past, and that's really valuable. And on the other side, the newest hires, they will have a lot of information about fresh perspectives. They haven't been indoctrinated into the organization's way of doing things yet, and that's also very valuable. So the clock face is a very interesting way of, again, making visible what are the kind of things that people can contribute with. And then you get curious. You've been here how many decades? Wow, now I really want to hear your opinion on things, right? Or, oh, you're this is your first week, amazing, now I want to hear. It sparks curiosity. Another choreography that is really exciting is the fishbowl choreography. So here you will divide people in two circles, an inner circle that is having a conversation about a theme, and an outer circle that's listening to the inner circle having a conversation about a theme. And this is really useful because one of the things that you really want to cultivate when you cultivate a culture of dialogue is the capacity for listening. And if you sit in the outer circle, that's the only thing you're doing. You're just listening. So it's great for that. You can do a lot with this choreography. You can ask people to be more to either you can just say we got 10 minutes where we are in one circle and then we switch, or you can encourage people to fluidly move between the two circles. There's many things that you can do with this, but it really it's a choreography that highlights the capacity to shift between talking and to consciously shift between talking and listening. So that can be very useful. Another choreography. There's so many. I won't be able to go through all of them, but I'll give some more. Another one that I really like is what I like to talk about as randomly assigned viewpoints. So if you have a, let me see, I'm having a lunch, bon appetit. So if you have a debate, so you have a polarizing topic in the organization. Some people are very much on one side, some people are very much on the other side, and the two sides don't really see eye to eye and think that the other side is sort of silly for thinking what they're thinking. One of the capacities that we talk a lot about in when we teach dialogue is about respectful opposition, and respectful opposition can only happen if you're able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, if you understand the integrity and the value of the opposite position, even if you don't agree with it. Now, a way of cultivating this is to divide the room down the middle, making sure that there are people on both sides of that dividing line, and then just say, I don't care what your actual opinion are for the next 10 minutes. This is your opinion. And then you give the opinion to those two groups, and then now argue your case. And after 10 minutes or something like that, then you switch. And there can be something very powerful in being part of a group that's arguing something, that is arguing a randomly just assigned viewpoint. Now, this choreography gives people the possibility of getting in the shoes of the people they don't agree with, and because it's a group activity, um, I feel that often get people into a more sincere space than if they're doing it alone. And then it also, yes, and then the flipping also really helps. So you're gonna get to say your piece, right? You get both of them. Also, this choreography closely mirrors something that we talk a lot about in dialogue, and that is when you want to move a polarized conversation into the field of dialogue, one of the important things is you have to separate the individual from the viewpoint. So sometimes we talk about holding your viewpoint lightly or something like that, but you have to separate the individual from the viewpoint. So when somebody attacks the viewpoint, they don't attack you, even though that's your viewpoint. Separate the two, because then you can become much more curious about what viewpoints are in the room, how do they interact, how did they arise, and so on. And this is the kind of curiosity and exploration that's key for dialogue. Now, this choreography literally does that, right? There's viewpoints, and we just assign them to people, but it doesn't matter who we assign them to. So it supports that separation of individual and viewpoint. So, yes, there are many more, but I think I'm gonna stop here. So these were 3 concrete tools: doing check-ins at the start of the meeting, carefully crafted check-ins using questions and sentence stems. Then doing having a list of ground rules that you just spend 10 seconds on at the start of every meeting, so that you just remind, yeah, this is how we want to talk together. And fitting it so it fits your place, your organization. And then the last one here is use choreographies that can break stuck patterns. And of course, the more you know about dialogue and dialogue theory, the more you can be creative with creating creating choreographies that mirrors the theory. So those were the 3 tools, and now we have a little bit of time for a Q&A. So I'm just curious. Let's open it up, and if anybody have any questions or comments or something like that. Yeah, great. Well, I'm keep me informed. I hope that you will get a lot out of these tools. And as always, Sarah and I are doing open courses whenever enough people have shown interest. So if you want to get on an open 2 days course and learn a lot more about the dialogue and choreographies and all these kind of things, then send us a mail and say you're interested. And when enough people have sent us mails, then we look at the calendar. And if you are working in a place and say, no, I want you guys all for myself, please come to our organization. Again, please connect us to whoever makes decision about such courses, and we'd be very happy to come out. It's very fun to work in-house. And we always make it's never just teaching. It's always this fun mix of teaching and executive coaching at the same time, because we believe that is a powerful combination, so that the material actually gets put into practice. But yes, other than that, lovely to see you, and thank you so much for this serious, very impactful session. Excellent. I'm very happy that you enjoyed it, and spread the news, and sign up for the newsletter and all that good stuff. Lovely to see you. Take care. Have a lovely day.